The Indo-Greek Kingdom or Greco-Indian Kingdom was an Hellenistic kingdom covering various parts of Afghanistan and the northwest regions of the Indian subcontinent, parts of modern Pakistan and northwestern India, during the last 2 centuries BC, and was ruled by more than 30 kings, often conflicting with one another. The kingdom was founded when the Greco-Bactrian king Demetrius invaded the subcontinent early in the 2nd century BC. The Greeks in the Indian subcontinent were eventually divided from the Greco-Bactrians centered in Bactria, now the border between Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, and the Indo-Greeks in the present-day northwestern Indian subcontinent. The most famous Indo-Greek ruler was Menander Melinda. He had his capital at Sakala in the Punjab, present-day Sialkot. The expression, Indo-Greek Kingdom, loosely describes a number of various dynastic polities, traditionally associated with a number of regional capitals like Taxila, modern Punjab, Pakistan, Pushkalavati and Sagala. Other potential centers are only hinted at, for instance, Ptolemy Geographia and the nomenclature of later kings suggest that a certain Theophila in the south of the Indo-Greek sphere of influence may also have been a satrapal or royal seat at one time. During the 2 centuries of their rule, the Indo-Greek kings combined the Greek and Indian languages and symbols, as seen on their coins, and blended Greek and Indian ideas, as seen in the archaeological remains. The diffusion of Indo-Greek culture had consequences which are still felt today, particularly through the influence of Greco-Buddhist art. The ethnicity of the Indo-Greek may also have been hybrid to some degree. Euthydemus I was, according to Polybius, a Magnesian Greek. His son, Demetrius I, founder of the Indo-Greek Kingdom, was therefore of Greek ethnicity at least by his father. A marriage treaty was arranged for the same Demetrius with a daughter of the Seleucid ruler Antiochus III who had some Persian descent. The ethnicity of later Indo-Greek rulers is sometimes less clear. For example, Artemidoros 80 BC may have been of Indo-Scythian ascendancy, although this is now disputed. Following the death of Menander, most of his empire splintered and Indo-Greek influence was considerably reduced. Many new kingdoms and republics east of the Ravi River began to mint new coinage depicting military victories. The most prominent entities to form were the Yadhaya Republic, Arjunayanas, and the Adambaras. The Yadhayas and Arjunayanas both are said to have won victory by the sword. The Datta dynasty and Mitra dynasty soon followed in Mathura. The Indo-Greeks ultimately disappeared as a political entity around 10 AD following the invasions of the Indo-Scythians, although pockets of Greek populations probably remained for several centuries longer under the subsequent rule of the Indo-Parthians and Kushans. Background. Preliminary Greek presence in the Indian subcontinent. In 326 BC, Alexander the Great conquered the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent as far as the Hyphasis River, and established satrapies and founded several settlements, including Bucephala. He turned south when his troops refused to go further east. The Indian satrapies of the Punjab were left to the rule of Porus and Taxiles, who were confirmed again at the Treaty of Triparadisus in 321 BC, and remaining Greek troops in these satrapies were left under the command of General Eudemus. After 321 BC Eudemus toppled Taxiles, until he left India in 316 BC. To the south, another general also ruled over the Greek colonies of the Indus, Pithon, son of Agnar, until his departure for Babylon in 316 BC. Around 322 BC, the Greeks described as Yona or Yavana in Indian sources may then have participated, together with other groups, in the armed uprising of Chandragupta Maurya against the Nanda dynasty, and gone as far as Pataliputra for the capture of the city from the Nandas. The Mudrarakshasa of Vizakaduta as well as the Jaina work Parisishtaparvan talk of Chandragupta's alliance with the Himalayan king Parvatka, often identified with Porus, and according to these accounts, this alliance gave Chandragupta a composite and powerful army made up of Yavanas Greeks, Kamboyas, Shakas Scythians, Karatas Nepalese, Parasikas Persians, and Balakas Bactrians who took Pataliputra. In 305 BC, Seleucus I led an army to the Indus, where he encountered Chandragupta. The confrontation ended with a peace treaty, and an intermarriage agreement. Epigamia, Greek, epigamia meaning either a dynastic marriage or an agreement for intermarriage between Indians and Greeks. Accordingly, Seleucus ceded to Chandragupta his northwestern territories, possibly as far as Arachosia, and received 500 war elephants, which played a key role in the victory of Seleucus at the Battle of Ipsus. The Indians occupy in part some of the countries situated along the Indus, which formerly belonged to the Persians. Alexander deprived the Ariani of them, and established their settlements of his own. But Seleucus Nicator gave them to Sandrocatus in consequence of a marriage contract, and received in return 500 elephants. The details of the marriage agreement are not known, but since the extensive sources available on Seleucus never mention an Indian princess, it is thought that the marital alliance went the other way, with Chandragupta himself or his son Bindusara marrying a Seleucid princess, in accordance with contemporary Greek practices to form dynastic alliances. An Indian Puranic source, the Pratisarga Parva of the Bhavishya Purana, described the marriage of Chandragupta with a Greek Yavana princess, daughter of Seleucus, before accurately detailing early Mauryan genealogy. Chandragupta married with a daughter of Saluva, the Yavana king of Pasasa. Thus, he mixed the Buddhists and the Yavanas. He ruled for 60 years. From him, Bindusara was born and ruled for the same number of years as his father. His son was Ashoka. Also several Greeks, such as the historian Megasthenes, followed by Dimachus and Dionysius, were sent to reside at the Mauryan court. Presents continued to be exchanged between the two rulers. The intensity of these contacts is testified by the existence of a dedicated Mauryan State Department for Greek Yavana and Persian foreigners, or the remains of Hellenistic pottery that can be found throughout northern India. On these occasions, Greek populations apparently remained in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent under Mauryan rule. Chandragupta's grandson Ashoka, who had converted to the Buddhist faith, declared in the Edicts of Ashoka, set in stone, some of them written in Greek, that Greek populations within his realm also had converted to Buddhism. Here in the king's domain among the Greeks, the Kambojas, the Nabaka, the Nabapamkits, the Bhojas, the Pitanakas, the Andhras and the Palitas, everywhere people are following beloved of the gods' instructions in Dharma. In his edicts, Ashoka mentions that he had sent Buddhist emissaries to Greek rulers as far as the Mediterranean Edict No. 13, and that he developed herbal medicine in their territories, for the welfare of humans and animals Edict No. 2. The Greeks in India even seem to have played an active role in the propagation of Buddhism, as some of the emissaries of Ashoka such as Dharmaraksita, or the teacher Mahadharmaraksita, are described in Pali sources as leading Greek Yona, i.e., Ionian Buddhist monks, active in Buddhist proselytism, the Mahavamsa, 12. It is also thought that Greeks contributed to the sculptural work of the Pillars of Ashoka, and more generally to the blossoming of Mauryan art. Some Greeks Yavanas may have played an administrative role in the territories ruled by Ashoka. The Junagadh rock inscription of Rudradaman records that during the rule of Ashoka, a Yavana king, governor named Tushasva was in charge in the area of Gurnar, Gujarat, mentioning his role in the construction of a water reservoir. Again in 206 BC, the Seleucid emperor Antiochus led an army to the Kabul valley, where he received war elephants and presents from the local king Sophagasinus. He Antiochus crossed the Caucasus Indicus or Paropamisus, Mod. Hindukush and descended into India, renewed his friendship with Sophagasinus the king of the Indians, received more elephants, until he had 150 altogether, and having once more provisioned his troops, set out again personally with his army, leaving Androsthenes of Cyzicus the duty of taking home the treasure which this king had agreed to hand over to him. Greek rule in Bactria. Alexander had also established several colonies in neighbouring Bactria, such as Alexandria on the Oxus modern Ai-Khanoum and Alexandria of the Caucasus medieval Kapisa, modern Bagram. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, Bactria came under the control of Seleucus I Nicator, who founded the Seleucid Empire. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom was founded when Diodotus I, the satrap of Bactria and probably the surrounding provinces seceded from the Seleucid Empire around 250 BC. The preserved ancient sources see below are somewhat contradictory and the exact date of Bactrian independence has not been settled. Somewhat simplified, there is a high chronology c. 255 BC and a low chronology c. 246 BC for Diodotus' secession. The high chronology has the advantage of explaining why the Seleucid king Antiochus II issued very few coins in Bactria, as Diodotos would have become independent there early in Antiochus' reign. On the other hand, the low chronology, from the mid-240s BC, has the advantage of connecting the secession of Deiodatus I with the Third Syrian War, a catastrophic conflict for the Seleucid Empire. Deiodatus, the governor of the Thousand Cities of Bactria Latin, Theodatus, mil urbium Bactrianarum praefectus, defected and proclaimed himself king. All the other people of the Orient followed his example and seceded from the Macedonians. The new kingdom, highly urbanized and considered as one of the richest of the Orient, opulentissimum illud mil urbium Bactrianum imperium, the extremely prosperous Bactrian Empire of the Thousand Cities. Justin, XLI. 1, was to further grow in power and engage into territorial expansion to the east and the west. The Greeks who caused Bactria to revolt grew so powerful on account of the fertility of the country that they became masters, not only of Ariana, but also of India, as Apollodorus of Artemida says, and more tribes were subdued by them than by Alexander. Their cities were Bactra, also called Zariaspa, through which flows a river bearing the same name and emptying into the Oxus, and Darapsa, and several others. Among these was Eucratidia, which was named after its ruler. When the ruler of neighbouring Parthia, the former satrap and self-proclaimed king Andragoras, was eliminated by Arsaces, the rise of the Parthian Empire cut off the Greco-Bactrians from direct contact with the Greek world. Overland trade continued at a reduced rate, while sea trade between Greek Egypt and Bactria developed. Deiodatus was succeeded by his son Deiodatus II, who allied himself with the Parthian Arsaces in his fight against Seleucus II. Soon after, relieved by the death of Deiodatus, Arsaces made peace and concluded an alliance with his son, also by the name of Deiodatus. Some time later he fought against Seleucos who came to punish the rebels, and he prevailed. The Parthians celebrated this day as the one that marked the beginning of their freedom. Euthydemus, a Magnesian Greek according to Polybius and possibly satrap of Sogdiana, overthrew Deiodatus II around 230 BC and started his own dynasty. Euthydemus's control extended to Sogdiana, going beyond the city of Alexandria Esket founded by Alexander the Great in Fergana. And they also held Sogdiana, situated above Bactriana towards the east between the Oxus River, which forms the boundary between the Bactrians and the Sogdians, and the Iaxartes River. And the Iaxartes forms also the boundary between the Sogdians and the Nomads. Euthydemus was attacked by the Seleucid ruler Antiochus III around 210 BC. Although he commanded 10,000 horsemen, Euthydemus initially lost a battle on the Arius and had to retreat. He then successfully resisted a 3-year siege in the fortified city of Bactra, modern Balkh, before Antiochus finally decided to recognize the new ruler, and to offer one of his daughters to Euthydemus's son Demetrius around 206 BC. Classical accounts also relate that Euthydemus negotiated peace with Antiochus III by suggesting that he deserved credit for overthrowing the original rebel Deiodatus, and that he was protecting Central Asia from nomadic invasions thanks to his defensive efforts. For if he did not yield to this demand, neither of them would be safe, seeing that great hordes of nomads were close at hand, who were a danger to both, and that if they admitted them into the country, it would certainly be utterly barbarized. Following the departure of the Seleucid army, the Bactrian kingdom seems to have expanded. In the west, areas in northeastern Iran may have been absorbed, possibly as far as into Parthia, whose ruler had been defeated by Antiochus the Great. These territories possibly are identical with the Bactrian satrapies of Taporia and Traxion. To the north, Euthydemus also ruled Sogdiana and Fergana, and there are indications that from Alexandria Esket the Greco-Bactrians may have led expeditions as far as Kashgar and Urumqi in Chinese Turkestan, leading to the first known contacts between China and the West around 220 BC. The Greek historian Strabo too writes that they extended their empire even as far as the Saras Chinese and the Frinu. Several statuettes and representations of Greek soldiers have been found north of the Tian Shan, on the doorstep to China, and are today on display in the Xinjiang Museum at Urumqi. Boardman. Greek influences on Chinese art have also been suggested. Hirth, Rostovtsev. Designs with rosette flowers, geometric lines, and glass inlays, suggestive of Hellenistic influences, can be found on some early Han Dynasty bronze mirrors. Numismatics also suggest that some technology exchanges may have occurred on these occasions. The Greco-Bactrians were the first in the world to issue cupro-nickel 75/25 ratio coins, an alloy technology only known by the Chinese at the time under the name white copper. Some weapons from the Warring States period were in copper-nickel alloy. The practice of exporting Chinese metals, in particular iron, for trade is attested around that period. Kings Euthydemus II, Agathocles and Pantaleon made these coin issues around 170 BC, and it has alternatively been suggested that a nickeliferous copper ore was the source from mines at Anorak. Copper-nickel would not be used again in coinage until the 19th century. The presence of Chinese people in the Indian subcontinent from ancient times is also suggested by the accounts of the Senyas in the Mahabharata and the Manu Smriti. The Han dynasty explorer and ambassador Zhang Qian visited Bactria in 126 BC, and reported the presence of Chinese products in the Bactrian markets. "When I was in Bactria Daxia," Zhang Qian reported, "I saw bamboo canes from Chong and cloth made in the province of Shu territories of southwestern China. When I asked the people how they had gotten such articles, they replied, 'Our merchants go buy them in the markets of Chengdu, India.'" Upon his return, Zhang Qian informed the Chinese Emperor Han Wudi of the level of sophistication of the urban civilizations of Fergana, Bactria and Parthia, who became interested in developing commercial relationships with them. The Son of Heaven on hearing all this reasoned thus: Fergana and the possessions of Bactria and Parthia are large countries, full of rare things, with a population living in fixed abodes and given to occupations somewhat identical with those of the Chinese people, and placing great value on the rich produce of China. A number of Chinese envoys were then sent to Central Asia, triggering the development of the Silk Road from the end of the 2nd century BC. The Indian Emperor Chandragupta, founder of the Mauryan dynasty, had reconquered northwestern India upon the death of Alexander the Great around 322 BC. However, contacts were kept with his Greek neighbours in the Seleucid Empire, a dynastic alliance or the recognition of intermarriage between Greeks and Indians were established, described as an agreement on epigamia in ancient sources, and several Greeks, such as the historian Megasthenes, resided at the Mauryan court. Subsequently, each Mauryan emperor had a Greek ambassador at his court. Chandragupta's grandson Ashoka converted to the Buddhist faith and became a great proselytizer in the line of the traditional Pali canon of Theravada Buddhism, directing his efforts towards the Indian and the Hellenistic worlds from around 250 BC. According to the edicts of Ashoka, set in stone, some of them written in Greek, he sent Buddhist emissaries to the Greek lands in Asia and as far as the Mediterranean. The edicts name each of the rulers of the Hellenistic world at the time. The conquest by Dharma has been won here, on the borders, and even 600 yojanas 4,000 miles away, where the Greek king Antiochos rules, beyond there where the 4 kings named Ptolemy, Antigonos, Magas and Alexander rule, likewise in the south among the Cholas, the Pandyas, and as far as Tamraparni. Some of the Greek populations that had remained in northwestern India apparently converted to Buddhism. Here in the king's domain among the Greeks, the Kamboyas, the Nabaka, the Nabapamkats, the Bojas, the Pitnakas, the Andhras and the Palitas, everywhere people are following beloved of the gods' instructions in Dharma. Furthermore, according to Pali sources, some of Ashoka's emissaries were Greek Buddhist monks, indicating close religious exchanges between the two cultures. When the Thera elder Magaliputta, the illuminator of the religion of the conqueror Ashoka, had brought the Third Council to an end, he sent forth Theras, one here and one there, and to Aparantaka, the western countries, corresponding to Gujarat and Sindh, he sent the Greek Yona named Dhammarakita, and the Thera Maharakita he sent into the country of the Yona. Greco-Bactrians probably received these Buddhist emissaries, at least Maharakita, lit. The Great Saved One, who was sent to the country of the Yona, and somehow tolerated the Buddhist faith, although little proof remains. In the 2nd century AD, the Christian dogmatist Clement of Alexandria recognized the existence of Buddhist sramanas among the Bactrians, meaning Oriental Greeks, in that period, and even their influence on Greek thought. Thus philosophy, a thing of the highest utility, flourished in antiquity among the barbarians, shedding its light over the nations. And afterwards it came to Greece. First in its ranks were the prophets of the Egyptians, and the Chaldeans among the Assyrians, and the Druids among the Gauls, and the Sramanas among the Bactrians, Sarmanooi Bactron, and the philosophers of the Celts, and the Magi of the Persians, who foretold the Saviour's birth, and came into the land of Judea guided by a star. The Indian gymnosophists are also in the number, and the other barbarian philosophers. And of these there are 2 classes, some of them called Sramanas, Sarmanai, and others Brahmins, Brahmani. Rise of the Shungas 185 BC. In India, the Maurya dynasty was overthrown around 185 BC when Pushyamitra Shunga, the commander-in-chief of Mauryan imperial forces and a Brahmin, assassinated the last of the Mauryan emperors Brihadratha. Pushyamitra Shunga then ascended the throne and established the Shunga Empire, which extended its control as far west as the Punjab. Buddhist sources, such as the Ashokavadana, mention that Pushyamitra was hostile towards Buddhists and allegedly persecuted the Buddhist faith. A large number of Buddhist monasteries viharas were allegedly converted to Hindu temples, in such places as Nalanda, Bodhgaya, Sarnath or Mathura. While it is established by secular sources that Hinduism and Buddhism were in competition during this time, with the Shungas preferring the former to the latter, historians such as Étienne Lamotte and Romila Thapar argue that Buddhist accounts of persecution of Buddhists by Shungas are largely exaggerated. Some Puranic sources however also describe the resurgence of Brahmanism following the Maurya dynasty, and the killing of millions of Buddhists, such as the Pratisarga Parva of the Bhavishya Purana. At this time after the rule of Chandragupta, Bindusara and Ashoka, the best of the Brahmanas, Kanyakubha, performed sacrifice on the top of a mountain named Arbuda. By the influence of Vedic mantras, 4 Kshatriyas appeared from the yajna sacrifice. They kept Ashoka under their control and annihilated all the Buddhists. It is said there were 4 million Buddhists and all of them were killed by uncommon weapons. History of the Indo-Greek Kingdom. Nature and quality of the sources. Some narrative history has survived for most of the Hellenistic world, at least of the kings and the wars. This is lacking for India. The main Greco-Roman source on the Indo-Greeks is Justin, who wrote an anthology drawn from the Roman historian Pompeius Trogus, who in turn wrote, from Greek sources, at the time of Augustus Caesar. In addition to these dozen sentences, the geographer Strabo mentions India a few times in the course of his long dispute with Eratosthenes about the shape of Eurasia. Most of these are purely geographical claims, but he does mention that Eratosthenes' sources say that some of the Greek kings conquered further than Alexander. Strabo does not believe them on this, nor does he believe that Menander and Demetrius son of Euthydemus conquered more tribes than Alexander. There is half a story about Menander in one of the books of Polybius which has not come down to us intact. There are Indian literary sources, ranging from the Milinda Panha, a dialogue between a Buddhist sage Nagasena and Indianized names that may be related to Indo-Greek kings such as Menander. The first names in these sources are consistently Indianized, and there is some dispute whether, for example, Dharmamitra represents Demetrius or is an Indian prince with that name. There was also a Chinese expedition to Bactria by Chang Kaiyan under the Emperor Wu of Han, recorded in the records of the Grand Historian and Book of the former Han, with additional evidence in the Book of the later Han. The identification of places and peoples behind transcriptions into Chinese is difficult, and several alternate interpretations have been proposed. Other evidence of the broader and longer influence of Indo-Greeks is possibly suggested by Yavanaraja inscription, dated to 1st century BCE. It mentions Yavanas, a term which is derived from Ionians, and which at that time most likely means Indo-Greeks. Expansion of Demetrius into India. Demetrius I, the son of Euthydemus, is generally considered as the Greco-Bactrian king who first launched the Greek expansion into India. He is therefore the founder of the Indo-Greek realm. The true intents of the Greek kings in occupying India are unknown, but it is thought that the elimination of the Maurya Empire by the Sangha greatly encouraged this expansion. The Indo-Greeks, in particular Menander I, who is said in the Milindapanha to have converted to Buddhism, also possibly received the help of Indian Buddhists. There is an inscription from his father's reign already officially hailing Demetrius as victorious. He also has one of the few absolute dates in Indo-Greek history, after his father held off Antiochus III for 2 years, 208–6 BC. The peace treaty included the offer of a marriage between Demetrius and Antiochus' daughter. Coins of Demetrius I have been found in Arachosia and in the Kabul Valley. The latter would be the first entry of the Greeks into India, as they defined it. There is also literary evidence for a campaign eastward against the Saras and the Frinu, but the order and dating of these conquests is uncertain. Demetrius I seems to have conquered the Kabul Valley, Arachosia, and perhaps Gandhara. He struck no Indian coins, so either his conquests did not penetrate that far into India or he died before he could consolidate them. On his coins, Demetrius I always carries the elephant helmet worn by Alexander, which seems to be a token of his Indian conquests. Boparachi believes that Demetrius received the title of King of India following his victories south of the Hindukush. He was also given, though perhaps only posthumously, the title Anaketos, Anaketos, lit. Invincible, a cult title of Heracles, which Alexander had assumed. The later Indo-Greek kings Lysias, Philoxenus, and Artemidorus also took it. Finally, Demetrius may have been the founder of a newly discovered Yavana era, starting in 186 BC. First bilingual and multi-religion monetary system. After the death of Demetrius, the Bactrian kings Pantaleon and Agathocles struck the first bilingual coins with Indian inscriptions found as far east as Taxila, so in their time c. 185–170 BC the Bactrian kingdom seems to have included Gandhara. These first bilingual coins used the Brahmi script, whereas later kings would generally use Kharoshthi. They also went as far as incorporating Indian deities, variously interpreted as Hindu deities or the Buddha. They also included various Indian devices lion, elephant, zebu bull and symbols, some of them Buddhist such as the tree and railing. These symbols can also be seen in the post-Mauryan coinage of Gandhara. The Hinduist coinage of Agathocles is few but spectacular. 6 Indian standard silver drachmas were discovered at Iconium in 1970, which depict Hindu deities. These are early avatars of Vishnu, Balarama Sankarsana with attributes consisting of the Gada mace and the plough, and Vasudeva Krishna with the Vishnu attributes of the Shankha, a pear-shaped case or conch, and the Sudarshana chakra wheel. These first attempts at incorporating Indian culture were only partly preserved by later kings. They all continued to struck bilingual coins, sometimes in addition to Attic coinage, but Greek deities remained prevalent. Indian animals, however, such as the elephant, the bull or the lion, possibly with religious overtones, were used extensively in their Indian standard square coinage. Buddhist wheels Dharma chakras still appear in the coinage of Menander I and Menander II. Several Bactrian kings followed after Demetrius' death, and it seems likely that the civil wars between them made it possible for Apollodotus I from c. 180–175 BC to make himself independent as the first proper Indo-Greek king who did not rule from Bactria. Large numbers of his coins have been found in India, and he seems to have reigned in Gandhara as well as western Punjab. Apollodotus I was succeeded by or ruled alongside Antimachus II, likely the son of the Bactrian king Antimachus I. Rule of Menander I. The next important Indo-Greek king was Menander from c. 165–155 BC, who has been described as the greatest of the Indo-Greek kings. His coins are found as far as eastern Punjab. Menander seems to have begun a second wave of conquests, and since he already ruled in India, it seems likely that the easternmost conquests were made by him. Thus from 161 BC onwards Menander was the ruler of Punjab until his death in 130 BC. Menander made Sagala his capital, and after conquering the Punjab region he subsequently made an expedition across northern India and reached the Mauryan capital of Patna. Soon after, Eucratides I, king of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, began warring with the Indo-Greeks in the northwestern frontier. According to Apollodorus of Artemida, quoted by Strabo, the Indo-Greek territory for a while included the Indian coastal provinces of Sindh and possibly Gujarat. With archaeological methods, the Indo-Greek territory can however only be confirmed from the Kabul Valley to the eastern Punjab, so Greek presence outside was probably short-lived or non-existent. Some sources also claim that the Indo-Greeks may have reached the Shunga capital Pataliputra in northeastern India. However, the nature of this expedition is a matter of controversy. One theory is that Indo-Greeks were invited to join a raid led by local Indian kings down the Ganges River. The other is that it was a campaign likely made by Menander. Irrespective, it appears that Pataliputra, if at all captured, was not held as the expedition was forced to retreat, probably due to wars in their own territories. The important Bactrian king Eucratides seems to have attacked the Indo-Greek kingdom during the mid-2nd century BC. A Demetrius, called King of the Indians, seems to have confronted Eucratides in a 4-month siege, reported by Justin, but he ultimately lost. In any case, Eucratides seems to have occupied territory as far as the Indus, between ca. 170 BC and 150 BC. His advances were ultimately reclaimed by the Indo-Greek king Menander I. Menander is considered to have been probably the most successful Indo-Greek king, and the conqueror of the largest territory. The finds of his coins are the most numerous and the most widespread of all the Indo-Greek kings. Menander is also remembered in Buddhist literature, where he is called Milinda, and is described in the Milinda Panha as a convert to Buddhism. He became an arhat whose relics were enshrined in a manner reminiscent of the Buddha. He also introduced a new coin type, with Athena Alkidemos, protector of the people, on the reverse, which was adopted by most of his successors in the East. Following the death of Menander, his empire was greatly reduced due to the emergence of new kingdoms and republics within his allotted territories within India. The most eminent entities to splinter were the Yadhaya Republic and the Arjunayanas, which began to mint coins mentioning military victories. Along with numismatic evidence, the Junagadh rock inscription of Rudradaman details the conquests of the Saka king Rudradaman I of the western satraps over the Yadhaya Republic, reaffirming their independence from the Menander's empire. From the mid-2nd century BC, the Scythians, in turn being pushed forward by the Yuji who were completing a long migration from the border of China, started to invade Bactria from the north. Around 130 BC, the last Greco-Bactrian king Heliocles was probably killed during the invasion and the Greco-Bactrian kingdom proper ceased to exist. The Parthians also probably played a role in the downfall of the Bactrian kingdom. There are however no historical recordings of events in the Indo-Greek kingdom after Menander's death around 130 BC, since the Indo-Greeks had now become very isolated from the rest of the Greco-Roman world. The later history of the Indo-Greek states, which lasted to around the shift BC, AD, is reconstructed almost entirely from archaeological and numismatical analyses. Western accounts. Greek presence in Arachosia, where Greek populations had been living since before the acquisition of the territory by Chandragupta from Seleucus, is mentioned by Isidore of Charax. He describes Greek cities there, one of them called Demetrias, probably in honor of the conqueror Demetrius. Apollodotus I and Menander I were mentioned by Pompeius Trogus as important Indo-Greek kings. It is theorized that Greek advances temporarily went as far as the Shunga capital Pataliputra, today Patna, in eastern India. Senior considers that these conquests can only refer to Menander. Against this, John Michener considers that the Greeks probably raided the Indian capital of Pataliputra during the time of Demetrius, though Michener's analysis is not based on numismatic evidence. Of the eastern parts of India, then, there have become known to us all those parts which lie this side of the Hypanis, and also any parts beyond the Hypanis of which an account has been added by those who, after Alexander, advanced beyond the Hypanis, to the Ganges and Pataliputra. The seriousness of the attack is in some doubt. Menander may merely have joined a raid led by Indian kings down the Ganges, as Indo-Greek presence has not been confirmed this far east. To the south, the Greeks may have occupied the areas of the Sindh and Gujarat, including the strategic harbour of Baragaza, Bharuch. Conquests also attested by coins dating from the Indo-Greek ruler Apollodotus I and by several ancient writers. Strabo 11, Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, chap. 41-47. The Greeks took possession, not only of Pataline, but also, on the rest of the coast, of what is called the kingdom of Seraustus and Sigurtus. The Periplus further explains ancient Indo-Greek rule and continued circulation of Indo-Greek coinage in the region. To the present day ancient drachmae are current in Baragaza, coming from this country, bearing inscriptions in Greek letters, and the devices of those who reigned after Alexander, Apollodorus and Menander. Narain however dismisses the account of the Periplus as just a sailor's story, and holds that coin finds are not necessarily indicators of occupation. Coin hoards further suggest that in central India, the area of Malwa may also have been conquered. Rule in Mathura. Slightly northwest of Mathura, numerous Indo-Greek coins were found in the city of Kokrakot, modern Rhotic, belonging to as many as 14 different Indo-Greek kings, as well as coin molds in Narungabad, suggesting Indo-Greek occupation of Haryana in the 2nd–1 stone centuries BCE. From numismatic, literary and epigraphic evidence, it seems that the Indo-Greeks also had control over Mathura at some time, especially during the rule of Menander I 165–135 BC. An inscription in Mathura discovered in 1988, the Yavanaraja inscription, mentions, "the last day of year 116 of Yavana hegemony Yavanaraja." The Yavanaraja probably refers to the rule of the Indo-Greeks in Mathura as late as around 70 to 60 BC, year 116 of the Yavana era. The extent of Indo-Greek rule in Mathura has been disputed, but it is also known that no remains of Sangha rule have been found in Mathura, and their territorial control is only proved as far as the central city of Ayodhya in northern central India, through the Dhanadeva Ayodhya inscription. Archaeological excavations of cast die-struck coins have also revealed the presence of a Mitra dynasty coin issuers who did not name themselves kings on their coins in Mathura sometime between 150 BC to 20 BC. Additionally, coins belonging to a Datta dynasty have also been excavated in Mathura. Whether these dynasties ruled independently or as satraps to larger kingdoms is unknown. Mathura may then have been conquered by the Mitra dynasty, or ruled independently by the Datta dynasty during the 1st century BCE. In any case, Mathura was under the control of the Indo-Scythian northern satraps from the 1st century CE. Indian sources. Various Indian records describe Yavana attacks on Mathura, Panchala, Saketa, and Pataliputra. The term Yavana is thought to be a transliteration of Ionians, and is known to have designated Hellenistic Greeks, starting with the Edicts of Ashoka, where Ashoka writes about the Yavana king Antiochus, but may have sometimes referred to other foreigners as well. After the 1st century AD, Patanjali, a grammarian and commentator on Panini around 150 BC, describes in the Mahabhasya the invasion in 2 examples using the imperfect tense of Sanskrit, denoting a recent event. Aranad Yavana Saketam. The Yavanas Greeks were besieging Saketa. Aranad Yavano Madhyamikam. The Yavanas were besieging Madhyamika, the middle country. Also the Brahmanical text of the Yuga Purana, which describes Indian historical events in the form of a prophecy, but is thought to be likely historical, relates the attack of the Indo-Greeks on the capital Pataliputra, a magnificent fortified city with 570 towers and 64 gates according to Megasthenes, and describes the ultimate destruction of the city's walls. Then, after having approached Saketa together with the Panchalas and the Mathuras, the Yavanas, valiant in battle, will reach Kusumadvaja, the town of the flower standard, Pataliputra. Then, once Puspapura, another name of Pataliputra, has been reached and its celebrated mud walls cast down, all the realm will be in disorder. Accounts of battles between the Greeks and the Shunga in central India are also found in the Malavikanimitram, a play by Kalidasa which is thought to describe an encounter between a Greek cavalry squadron and Vasumitra, the grandson of Pushyamitra, during the latter's reign, by the Sindh River or the Kali-Sindh River. According to the Yuga Purana, the Yavanas thereafter retreated following internal conflicts. The Yavanas Greeks will command, the kings will disappear. But ultimately, the Yavanas, intoxicated with fighting, will not stay in Madadesa, the middle country. There will be undoubtedly a civil war among them, arising in their own country, Bactria. There will be a terrible and ferocious war. Gargi Samhita, Yuga Purana chapter, number 7. Earlier authors such as Tarn have suggested that the raid on Pataliputra was made by Demetrius. According to Michener, the Hathigumpha inscription indicates the presence of the Greeks led by a Demetrius in eastern India Magadha during the 1st century BC, although this interpretation was previously disputed by Narain. Then in the 8th year, Kharavela with a large army having sacked Goradagiri causes pressure on Rajagriha. On account of the loud report of this act of valour, the Yavana Greek king Dimi retreated to Mathura having extricated his demoralised army. But while this inscription may be interpreted as an indication that Demetrius I was the king who made conquests in Punjab, it is still true that he never issued any Indian standard coins, only numerous coins with elephant symbolism, and the restoration of his name in Kharosthi on the Hathagumpha inscription, D Ta, has been doubted. The D is a reconstruction, and it may be noted that the name of another Indo-Greek king, Amyntas, is spelt A Ta in Kharosthi and may fit in. Therefore, Menander remains the likeliest candidate for any advance east of Punjab. Consolidation. The important Bactrian king Eucratides seems to have attacked the Indo-Greek kingdom during the mid-2nd century BC. A Demetrius, called King of the Indians, seems to have confronted Eucratides in a 4-month siege, reported by Justin, but he ultimately lost. In any case, Eucratides seems to have occupied territory as far as the Indus, between ca. 170 BC and 150 BC. His advances were ultimately checked by the Indo-Greek king Menander I. Menander is considered to have been probably the most successful Indo-Greek king, and the conqueror of the largest territory. The finds of his coins are the most numerous and the most widespread of all the Indo-Greek kings. Menander is also remembered in Buddhist literature, where he is called Milinda, and is described in the Milinda Panha as a convert to Buddhism. He became an arhat whose relics were enshrined in a manner reminiscent of the Buddha. He also introduced a new coin type, with Athena Alkidemos, protector of the people, on the reverse, which was adopted by most of his successors in the East. Fall of Bactria and death of Menander. From the mid-2nd century BC, the Scythians, in turn being pushed forward by the Yuezhi who were completing a long migration from the border of China, started to invade Bactria from the north. Around 130 BC the last Greco-Bactrian king Heliocles was probably killed during the invasion and the Greco-Bactrian kingdom proper ceased to exist. The Parthians also probably played a role in the downfall of the Bactrian kingdom. Immediately after the fall of Bactria, the bronze coins of Indo-Greek king Zoilos I (130–120 BC), successor of Menander in the western part of the Indian territories, combined the club of Heracles with a Scythian-type bowcase and short recurve bow inside a victory wreath, illustrating interaction with horse-mounted people originating from the steppes, possibly either the Scythians, future Indo-Scythians, or the Yuezhi, future Kushans, who had invaded Greco-Bactria. This bow can be contrasted to the traditional Hellenistic long bow depicted on the coins of the Eastern Indo-Greek queen Agathoclea. It is now known that 50 years later, the Indo-Scythian Maues was in alliance with the Indo-Greek kings in Taxila, and one of those kings, Artemidoros, seems to claim on his coins that he is the son of Maues, although this is now disputed. Preservation of the Indo-Greek realm. The extent of Indo-Greek rule is still uncertain and disputed. Probable members of the dynasty of Menander include the ruling queen Agathoclea, her son Strato I, and Nishas, though it is uncertain whether they ruled directly after Menander. Other kings emerged, usually in the western part of the Indo-Greek realm, such as Zoilos I, Lysias, Antialcidas and Philoxenos. These rulers may have been relatives of either the Eucratid or the Euthydemus dynasties. The names of later kings were often new members of Hellenistic dynasties usually inherited family names, but old reverses and titles were frequently repeated by the later rulers. Immediately after the fall of Bactria, the bronze coins of Indo-Greek king Zoilos I (130–120 BC), successor of Menander in the western part of the Indian territories, combined the club of Heracles with a Scythian-type bowcase and short recurve bow inside a victory wreath, illustrating interaction with horse-mounted people originating from the steppes, possibly either the Scythians, future Indo-Scythians, or the Yuezhi, future Kushans, who had invaded Greco-Bactria. This bow can be contrasted to the traditional Hellenistic long bow depicted on the coins of the Eastern Indo-Greek queen Agathoclea. It is now known that 50 years later, the Indo-Scythian Maues was in alliance with the Indo-Greek kings in Taxila, and one of those kings, Artemidoros, seems to claim on his coins that he is the son of Maues, although this is now disputed. While all Indo-Greek kings after Apollodotus I mainly issued bilingual Greek and Kharosthi coins for circulation in their own territories, several of them also struck rare Greek coins which have been found in Bactria. The later kings probably struck these coins as some kind of payment to the Scythian or Yuge tribes who now ruled there, though if as tribute or payment for mercenaries remains unknown. For some decades after the Bactrian invasion, relationships seem to have been peaceful between the Indo-Greeks and these relatively Hellenized nomad tribes. Interactions with Indian culture and religions. Indo-Greeks in the regions of Vidisha and Sanchi 115 BC. Vidishite is around this time, in 115 BC, that the embassy of Heliodorus, from King Antiochidas to the court of the Sungas king Bhagabhadra in Vidisha, is recorded. In the Sunga capital, Heliodorus established the Heliodorus pillar in a dedication to Vasudeva. This would indicate that relations between the Indo-Greeks and the Sungas had improved by that time, that people travelled between the two realms, and also that the Indo-Greeks readily followed Indian religions. Sanchi also around the same period, circa 115 BC, decorative reliefs were introduced for the first time at nearby Sanchi, 6 km away from Vidisha, by craftsmen from the northwest. These craftsmen left masons' marks in Kharushthi, mainly used in the area around Gandhara, as opposed to the local Brahmi script. This seems to imply that these foreign workers were responsible for some of the earliest motifs and figures that can be found on the railings of the stupa. These early reliefs at Sanchi, those of Sanchi Stupa No. 2, are dated to 115 BC, while the more extensive pillar carvings are dated to 80 BC. These reliefs have been described as the oldest extensive stupa decoration in existence. They are considered as the origin of Jataka illustrations in India. Indo-Greeks and Bharhut 100 to 75 BC. A warrior figure, the Bharhut Yavana, appeared prominently on a high relief on the railings of the stupa of Bharhut circa 100 BC. The warrior has the flowing head band of a Greek king, a northern tunic with Hellenistic pleats, he holds a grape in his hand, and has a Buddhist Triratana symbol on his sword. He has the role of a Dvarapala, a guardian of the entrance of the stupa. The warrior has been described as a Greek, some have suggested that he might even represent King Menander. Also around that time, craftsmen from the Gandhara area are known to have been involved in the construction of the Buddhist Torana gateways at Bharhut, which are dated to 100 to 75 BC. This is because masons' marks in Kharushthi have been found on several elements of the Bharhut remains, indicating that some of the builders at least came from the north, particularly from Gandhara where the Kharushthi script was in use. Cunningham explained that the Kharushthi letters were found on the balusters between the architraves of the gateway, but none on the railings, which all had Indian markings, summarizing that the gateways, which are artistically more refined, must have been made by artists from the north, whereas the railings were made by local artists. Sanchi Yavanas 50 to 0 BC. Again in Sanchi, but this time dating to the period of Satavahana rule circa 50 to 0 BC, one frieze can be observed which shows devotees in Greek attire making a dedication to the great stupa of Sanchi. The official notice at Sanchi describes, "foreigners worshipping stupa." The men are depicted with short curly hair, often held together with a headband of the type commonly seen on Greek coins. The clothing too is Greek, complete with tunics, capes and sandals, typical of the Greek traveling costume. The musical instruments are also quite characteristic, such as the double flute called aulos. Also visible are karniks-like horns. They are all celebrating at the entrance of the stupa. The actual participation of Yavanas, Yonas Greek donors to the construction of Sanchi is known from 3 inscriptions made by self-declared Yavana donors. The clearest of these reads, Satapathyasa Yanasha Danam, gift of the Yona of Setapatha. Setapatha being an uncertain city, possibly a location near Nasik, a place where other dedications by Yavanas are known, in cave number 17 of the Nasik Caves complex, and on the pillars of the Karla Caves not far away. A second similar inscription on a pillar reads, Sv Atapathasa Yona, Sa Danam, with probably the same meaning, gift of the Yona of Setapatha. The third inscription, on 2 adjacent pavement slabs reads, Kuda yo Vana Kasa bo Salayo. 2 slabs of Kuda, the Yanaka. Decline. King Philoxenus 100–95 BC briefly occupied the whole Greek territory from the Paropamisidae to western Punjab, after what the territories fragmented again between smaller Indo-Greek kings. Throughout the 1st century BC, the Indo-Greeks progressively lost ground to the Indians in the east, and the Scythians, the Uji, and the Parthians in the west. About 20 Indo-Greek kings are known during this period, down to the last known Indo-Greek rulers, Strato II and Strato III, who ruled in the Punjab region until around 10 AD. Loss of Hindukush territories 70 BC. Around 8 Western Indo-Greek kings are known, most of them are distinguished by their issues of Attic coins for circulation in the neighbouring region. One of the last important kings in the Paropamisidae, part of the Hindu Kush, was Hermaeus, who ruled until around 80 BC. Soon after his death, the Uji or Sakas took over his areas from neighbouring Bactria. When Hermaeus is depicted on his coins riding a horse, he is equipped with the recurve bow and bow case of the steppes, and R.C. Senior believes him to be of partly nomad origin. The later king Hippostratus may however also have held territories in the Paropamisidae. After the death of Hermaeus, the Uji or Saka nomads became the new rulers of the Paropamisidae, and minted vast quantities of posthumous issues of Hermaeus up to around 40 AD, when they blend with the coinage of the Kushan king Kujula Kadphises. The first documented Uji prince, Sapadbizes, ruled around 20 BC, and minted in Greek and in the same style as the Western Indo-Greek kings, probably depending on Greek mints and salators. Loss of Central Territories 48–47 BC. Around 80 BC, an Indo-Scythian king named Maues, possibly a general in the service of the Indo-Greeks, ruled for a few years in northwestern India before the Indo-Greeks again took control. He seems to have been married to an Indo-Greek princess named Meshen. King Hippostratus 65–55 BC seems to have been one of the most successful subsequent Indo-Greek kings until he lost to the Indo-Scythian Azaz I, who established an Indo-Scythian dynasty in 48–47 BC. Various coins seem to suggest that some sort of alliance may have taken place between the Indo-Greeks and the Scythians. Although the Indo-Scythians clearly ruled militarily and politically, they remained surprisingly respectful of Greek and Indian cultures. Their coins were minted in Greek mints, continued using proper Greek and Kharoshthi legends, and incorporated depictions of Greek deities, particularly Zeus. The Mathura lion capital inscription attests that they adopted the Buddhist faith, as do the depictions of deities forming the Vitarka mudra on their coins. Greek communities, far from being exterminated, probably persisted under Indo-Scythian rule. There is a possibility that a fusion, rather than a confrontation, occurred between the Greeks and the Indo-Scythians. In a recently published coin, Artemidorus seems to present himself as son of Maues, but this is now disputed, and the Bunner reliefs show Indo-Greeks and Indo-Scythians reveling in a Buddhist context. The last known mention of an Indo-Greek ruler is suggested by an inscription on a signet ring of the 1st century AD in the name of a king Theodamas, from the Bajor area of Gandhara, in modern Pakistan. No coins of him are known, but the signet bears in Kharoshthi script the inscription, Su Theodamasa, Su, being explained as the Greek transliteration of the ubiquitous Kushan royal title, Shao, Shah, King. Loss of Eastern Territories 10 AD. The Indo-Greek kingdoms lost most of their eastern territories in the 1st century BCE following the death of Menander. The Arjunayanas and the Yadhaya Republic mention military victories on their coins. Victory of the Arjunayanas. Victory of the Yadhayas. These entities would remain independent until being conquered by the Saka king Rudradaman I of the western satraps. Rudradaman, who by force destroyed the Yadhayas who were loath to submit, rendered proud as they were by having manifested their title of heroes among all Kshatriyas. They would again win independence until being conquered by Samudragupta of the Gupta Empire, and would disintegrate soon after. During the 1st century BC, the Trigurtas, Adambaras and finally the Kunandas also started to mint their own coins, usually in a style highly reminiscent of Indo-Greek coinage. The Yavanas may have ruled as far as the area of Mathura from the time of Menander I until the middle of the 1st century BC. The Magara inscription, from a village near Mathura, records the dedication of a well, in the 116th year of the reign of the Yavanas, which corresponds to circa 70 BC. In the 1st century BC, however, they lost the area of Mathura, either to the Mitra rulers under the Shunga Empire or to the Datta dynasty. Fleeing the Sakas in the west, the Indo-Greeks continued to rule a territory in the eastern Punjab. The kingdom of the last Indo-Greek kings Strato II and Strato III was conquered by the northern satrap Saka ruler Rajuvula around 10 AD. Later contributions. Some Greek nuclei may have continued to survive until the 2nd century AD. Nahapana had at his court a Greek writer named Yavanesvara, Lord of the Greeks, who translated from Greek to Sanskrit the Yavanajataka, saying of the Greeks, an astrological treatise and India's earliest Sanskrit work in horoscopy. Buddhist caves. A large number of Buddhist caves in India, particularly in the west of the country, were artistically hewn between the 1st century BCE and the 2nd century CE. Numerous donors provided the funds for the building of these caves and left donatory inscriptions, including laity, members of the clergy, government officials. Foreigners, mostly self-declared Yavanas, represented about 8% of all inscriptions. Karla Kavesiyavanas from the region of Nashik are mentioned as donors for 6 structural pillars in the great Buddhist Chaitya of the Karla caves built and dedicated by western satraps ruler Nahapana in 120 AD, although they seem to have adopted Buddhist names. In total, the Yavanas account for nearly half of the known dedicatory inscriptions on the pillars of the great Chaitya. To this day, Nasik is known as the wine capital of India, using grapes that were probably originally imported by the Greeks. Shivneri Kavastu. More Buddhist inscriptions by Yavanas were found in the Shivneri caves. One of the inscriptions mentions the donation of a tank by the Yavana named Arila, while the other mentions the gift of a refectory to the Sangha by the Yavana named Sita. On this second inscription, the Buddhist symbols of the Triratna and of the swastika reversed are positioned on both sides of the first word. Yavana saw. Pandavleni cave zone of the Buddhist caves, cave number 17 in the Pandavleni caves complex near Nashik was built and dedicated by Indragnadatta, the son of the Yavana Dharmadeva, a northerner from Dadamitri, in the 2nd century CE. The city of Dadamitri is thought to be the city of Demetrias in Arachosia, mentioned by Isidore of Charax. Manmodi Kavasan. The Manmodi caves, near Janur, an inscription by a Yavana donor appears on the facade of the main Chaitya, on the central flat surface of the lotus over the entrance. It mentions the erection of the hall front facade for the Buddhist Samgha, by a Yavana donor named Chanda. Yavanasa Kamdanam Gabada Ra. The meritorious gift of the facade of the Garbha hall by the Yavana Chanda. These contributions seem to have ended when the Satavahana king Gautamiputra Satakarni vanquished the western satrap ruler Nahapana, who had ruled over the area where these inscriptions were made, circa 130 CE. This victory is known from the fact that Gautamiputra Satakarni restruck many of Nahapana's coins, and that he is claimed to have defeated a confederacy of Shakas Western Kshatrapas, Pallavas Indo-Parthians, and Yavanas Indo-Greeks, in the inscription of his mother Queen Gautami Balasiri at cave number 3 of the Nasik caves. Siri Satakani Gautamiputra, who crushed down the pride and conceit of the Kshatriyas, who destroyed the Sakas, Yavanas and Pallavas, who rooted out the Kakarata race, who restored the glory of the Satavahana family. Inscriptions of the 3rd century CE 210 to 325 CE at the Nagarjunakonda Buddhist complex in southern India again mention the involvement of the Yavanas with Buddhism. An inscription in a monastery, site number 38, describes its residents as Acharayas and Theriyas of the Vibhajyavada school, who had gladdened the heart of the people of Kasmira, Gamdhara, Yavana, Vanavasa, and Tambapamnadipa. Yavana era for Buddha sculptures. Several Gandhara Buddha statues with dated inscriptions, are now thought to have been dated in the Yavana era, originating circa 186 BCE. One of the statues of the Buddha from Lorian Tangai has an inscription mentioning the year 318. The era in question is not specified, but it is now thought, following the discovery of the Bajor reliquary inscription and a suggestion by Richard Solomon which has gained wide acceptance, that it is dated in the Yavana era beginning in 186 BCE, and gives a date for the Buddha statue of about 143 CE. The inscription at the base of the statue is Sa 1 1 1 100 10 4 4 Prothavadasa D 20 4 1 1 1 Buddhagosa Dinamu Khe Saghoramasa Siddhavyasa. In year 318, the day 27 of Prasathapada, gift of Buddhahosa, the companion of Samgavarma. This would make it one of the earliest known representations of the Buddha, after the Bamaran casket 1st century CE, and at about the same time as the Buddhist coins of Kanishka. Another statue of Buddha, the Buddha of Hashtnagar, is inscribed from the year 384, also probably in the Yavana era, which is thought to be 209 CE. Only the pedestal is preserved in the British Museum, the statue itself, with folds of clothing having more relief than those of the Lorien Tangai Buddha, having disappeared. Ideology. Buddhism flourished under the Indo-Greek kings, and their rule, especially that of Menander, has been remembered as benevolent. It has been suggested, although direct evidence is lacking, that their invasion of India was intended to show their support for the Mauryan Empire, which may have had a long history of marital alliances, exchange of presents, demonstrations of friendship, exchange of ambassadors and religious missions with the Greeks. The historian Diodorus even wrote that the king of Pataliputra had great love for the Greeks. The Greek expansion into Indian territory may have been intended to protect Greek populations in India, and to protect the Buddhist faith from the religious persecutions of the Shungas. The city of Sirkap, founded by Demetrius, combines Greek and Indian influences without signs of segregation between the two cultures. The first Greek coins to be minted in India, those of Menander I and Apollodotus I, bear the mention, "Saviour King." Basileos Soteros, a title with high value in the Greek world which indicated an important deflective victory. For instance, Ptolemy I had been Soter savior because he had helped save Rhodes from Demetrius the besieger, and Antiochus I because he had saved Asia Minor from the Gauls. The title was also inscribed in Pali as Tratarasa on the reverse of their coins. Menander and Apollodotus may indeed have been saviors to the Greek populations residing in India, and to some of the Indians as well. Also, most of the coins of the Greek kings in India were bilingual, written in Greek on the front and in Pali on the back in the Kharosthi script, derived from Aramaic, rather than the more Eastern Brahmi, which was used only once on coins of Agathocles of Bactria, a tremendous concession to another culture never before made in the Hellenic world. From the reign of Apollodotus II, around 80 BC, Kharosthi letters started to be used as mintmarks on coins in combination with Greek monograms and mintmarks, suggesting the participation of local technicians to the minting process. Incidentally, these bilingual coins of the Indo-Greeks were the key in the decipherment of the Kharoshthi script by James Prinsep (1799–1840). Kharoshthi became extinct around the 3rd century AD. In Indian literature, the Indo-Greeks are described as Yavanas in Sanskrit, or Yonas in Pali, both thought to be transliterations of Ionians. In the Harivamsa, the Yavana Indo-Greeks are qualified, together with the Sakas, Kamboyas, Pallavas and Paradas as Kshatriya Pungava, i.e. foremost among the warrior caste, or Kshatriyas. The Majjhima Nikaya explains that in the lands of the Yavanas and Kamboyas, in contrast with the numerous Indian castes, there were only two classes of people, Aryas and Dasas, masters and slaves. Religion. In addition to the worship of the classical pantheon of the Greek deities found on their coins, Zeus, Heracles, Athena, Apollo, the Indo-Greeks were involved with local faiths, particularly with Buddhism, but also with Hinduism and Zoroastrianism. Interactions with Buddhism. Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan Empire, conquered the Greek satraps left by Alexander, which belonged to Seleucus I, Nicator of the Seleucid Empire. The Mauryan Emperor Ashoka would then establish the largest empire in the Indian subcontinent through an aggressive expansion. Ashoka converted to Buddhism following the destructive Kalinga War, abandoning further conquests in favor of humanitarian reforms. Ashoka erected the Edicts of Ashoka to spread Buddhism and the law of piety throughout his dominion. In one of his edicts, Ashoka claims to have converted his Greek population along with others to Buddhism. Here in the king's domain among the Greeks, the Kambojas, the Nabaka, the Nabopamkats, the Bhojas, the Pitanakas, the Andhras and the Palitas, everywhere people are following beloved of the gods' instructions in Dharma. The last Mauryan emperor Brihadratha was assassinated by Pushyamitra Shunga, the former Senapati or army lord of the Mauryan Empire and founder of the Shunga Empire. Pushyamitra is alleged to have persecuted Buddhism in favor of Brahmanism, likely in attempt to further remove the legacy of the Mauryan Empire. Pushyamitra equipped a fourfold army, and intending to destroy the Buddhist religion, he went to the Kakutarama in Pataliputra. Pushyamitra therefore destroyed the Sangharama, killed the monks there, and departed. After some time, he arrived in Sakala, and proclaimed that he would give a reward to whoever brought him the head of a Buddhist monk. It is possible that Menander I Soter or the Savior King chose Sakala as his capital due to the Buddhist presence there. Menander I is stated to have converted to Buddhism in the Milinda Panha, which records the dialogue between Menander and the Buddhist monk Nagasena. Menander is claimed to have obtained the title of an arhat, and afterwards, taking delight in the wisdom of the elder, he Menander handed over his kingdom to his son, and abandoning the household life for the house-less state, grew great in insight, and himself attained to arahatship. The wheel he represented on some of his coins was most likely Buddhist Dharmachakra. Another Indian text, the Stupavadana of Kasemendra, mentions in the form of a prophecy that Menander will build a stupa in Pataliputra. Plutarch also presents Menander as an example of benevolent rule, and explains that upon his death, the honor of sharing his remains was claimed by the various cities under his rule, and they were enshrined in monuments, Nemaya probably stupas, in a parallel with the historic Buddha. But when one Menander, who had reigned graciously over the Bactrians, died afterwards in the camp, the cities indeed by common consent celebrated his funerals, but coming to a contest about his relics, they were difficultly at last brought to this agreement, that his ashes being distributed, everyone should carry away an equal share, and they should all erect monuments to him. The Butkara stupa was monumentalized by the addition of Hellenistic architectural decorations during Indo-Greek rule in the 2nd century BC. A coin of Menander I was found in the second oldest stratum GST-2 of the Butkara stupa, suggesting a period of additional constructions during the reign of Menander. It is thought that Menander was the builder of the second oldest layer of the Butkara stupa, following its initial construction during the Mauryan Empire. Followers of the Dharma. Several Indo-Greek kings use the title Dharmakasa, i.e., follower of the Dharma, in the Khuroshti script on the obverse of their coins. The corresponding legend in Greek is dikaios, the just, a rather usual attribute on Greek coins. The expression, follower of the Dharma, would of course resonate strongly with Indian subjects, used to this expression being employed by pious kings, especially since the time of Ashoka, who advocated the Dharma in his inscriptions. The 7 kings using Dharmakasa, i.e., follower of the Dharma, are late Indo-Greek kings, from around 150 BCE, right after the reign of Menander I, and mainly associated with the area of Gandhara, Zoilos I 132–120 BCE, Strato 132–110 BCE, Heliocles II 95–80 BCE, Theophilos 130 or 90 BCE, Menander II 90–85 BCE, Archebios 90–80 BCE, and Paeocolaus c. 90 BCE. The attribute of Dramika was again used a century later by a known Buddhist practitioner, Indo-Scythian king Karahostes, to extol on his coins the virtues of his predecessor King Azaz. Blessing gestures. From the time of Agathoclea and Strato I, circa 100 BCE, kings and divinities are regularly shown on coins making blessing gestures, which often seem similar to the Buddhist Vitarka mudra. As centuries passed, the exact shapes taken by the hand becomes less clear. This blessing gesture was also often adopted by the Indo-Scythians. Bhagavad Occult. The Heliodorus pillar is a stone column that was erected around 113 BCE in central India in Vidisha near modern Besnagar, by Heliodorus, a Greek ambassador of the Indo-Greek king Antialcidas to the court of the Shunga king Bhagabhadra. The pillar originally supported a statue of Garuda. In the dedication, the Indo-Greek ambassador explains he is a devotee of Vasudeva, the god of gods. Historically, it is the first known inscription related to the Bhagavad Occult in India. Art. In general, the art of the Indo-Greeks is poorly documented, and few works of art apart from their coins and a few stone palettes are directly attributed to them. The coinage of the Indo-Greeks, however, is generally considered as some of the most artistically brilliant of antiquity. The Hellenistic heritage and artistic proficiency of the Indo-Greek world would suggest a rich sculptural tradition as well, but traditionally very few sculptural remains have been attributed to them. On the contrary, most Gandharan Hellenistic works of art are usually attributed to the direct successors of the Indo-Greeks in India in the 1st century AD, such as the nomadic Indo-Scythians, the Indo-Parthians and, in an already decadent state, the Kushans in general. Gandharan sculpture cannot be dated exactly, leaving the exact chronology open to interpretation. The possibility of a direct connection between the Indo-Greeks and Greco-Buddhist art has been reaffirmed recently as the dating of the rule of Indo-Greek kings has been extended to the first decades of the 1st century AD, with the reign of Strato II in the Punjab. Also, Fouché, Tarn, and more recently, Boardman, Busali and Makeveli have taken the view that some of the most purely Hellenistic works of northwestern India and Afghanistan, may actually be wrongly attributed to later centuries, and instead belong to a period 1 or 2 centuries earlier, to the time of the Indo-Greeks in the 2nd–1 stone century BC. This is particularly the case of some purely Hellenistic works in Hatta, Afghanistan, an area which might indeed be the cradle of incipient Buddhist sculpture in Indo-Greek style. Referring to one of the Buddha triads in Hatta, in which the Buddha is cited by very classical depictions of Heracles, Vajrapani and Taish, Hariti, Boardman explains that both figures might at first and even second glance, pass as, say, from Asia Minor or Syria of the 1st or 2nd century BC. These are essentially Greek figures, executed by artists fully conversant with far more than the externals of the classical style. Alternatively, it has been suggested that these works of art may have been executed by itinerant Greek artists during the time of maritime contacts with the West from the 1st to the 3rd century AD. The Greco-Buddhist art of Gandhara, beyond the omnipresence of Greek style and stylistic elements which might be simply considered as an enduring artistic tradition, offers numerous depictions of people in Greek classical realistic style, attitudes and fashion, clothes such as the chiton and the himation, similar in form and style to the 2nd century BC Greco-Bactrian statues of Iconium, hairstyle, holding contraptions which are characteristic of Greek culture, amphoras, kantaros, Greek drinking cups, in situations which can range from festive such as bacchanalian scenes to Buddhist devotional. Uncertainties in dating make it unclear whether these works of art actually depict Greeks of the period of Indo-Greek rule up to the 1st century BC, or remaining Greek communities under the rule of the Indo-Parthians or Kushans in the 1st and 2nd century AD. Benjamin Rowland thinks that the Indo-Greeks, rather than the Indo-Scythians or the Kushans, may have been the models for the bodhisattva statues of Gandhara. Economy. Very little is known about the economy of the Indo-Greeks, although it seems to have been rather vibrant. Coinage. The abundance of their coins would tend to suggest large mining operations, particularly in the mountainous area of the Hindukush, and an important monetary economy. The Indo-Greek did strike bilingual coins both in the Greek round standard and in the Indian square standard, suggesting that monetary circulation extended to all parts of society. The adoption of Indo-Greek monetary conventions by neighboring kingdoms, such as the Kunindas to the east and the Satavahanas to the south, would also suggest that Indo-Greek coins were used extensively for cross-border trade. Tribute payments. It would also seem that some of the coins emitted by the Indo-Greek kings, particularly those in the monolingual Attic standard, may have been used to pay some form of tribute to the Yuji tribes north of the Hindukush. This is indicated by the coins finds of the Kundas hoard in northern Afghanistan, which have yielded quantities of Indo-Greek coins in the Hellenistic Standard Greek weights, Greek language, although none of the kings represented in the hoard are known to have ruled so far north. Conversely, none of these coins have ever been found south of the Hindu Kush. Trade with China. The Indo-Greek kings in southern Asia issued the first known cupro-nickel coins, with Euthydemus II, dating from 180 to 170 BC, and his younger brothers Pantaleon and Agathocles around 170 BC. As only China was able to produce cupro-nickel at that time, and as the alloy ratios are exclusively similar, it has been suggested that the metal was the result of exchanges between China and Bactria. An indirect testimony by the Chinese explorer Zhang Qian, who visited Bactria around 128 BC, suggests that intense trade with southern China was going through northern India. Zhang Qian explains that he found Chinese products in the Bactrian markets, and that they were transiting through northwestern India, which he incidentally describes as a civilization similar to that of Bactria. "When I was in Bactria," Zhang Qian reported, "I saw bamboo canes from Chong and cloth silk, made in the province of Shu. When I asked the people how they had gotten such articles, they replied, 'Our merchants go buy them in the markets of Shendu, northwestern India.' Shendu, they told me, lies several thousand li southeast of Bactria. The people cultivate land, and live much like the people of Bactria." Recent excavations at the burial site of China's first emperor Qin Shi Huang, dating back to the 3rd century BCE, also suggest Greek influence in the artworks found there, including in the manufacture of the famous terracotta army. It is also suggested that Greek artists may have come to China at that time to train local artisans in making sculptures. Indian Ocean trade. Maritime relations across the Indian Ocean started in the 3rd century BC, and further developed during the time of the Indo-Greeks together with their territorial expansion along the western coast of India. The first contacts started when the Ptolemies constructed the Red Sea ports of Myos Hormos and Berenike, with destination the Indus Delta, the Kathiawar Peninsula or Muziris. Around 130 BC, Eudoxus of Cyzicus is reported Strabo, Geog. 2.3.4 to have made a successful voyage to India and returned with a cargo of perfumes and gemstones. By the time Indo-Greek rule was ending, up to 120 ships were setting sail every year from Myos Hormos to India Strabo Geog. 2.5.12. Armed forces. The coins of the Indo-Greeks provide rich clues on their uniforms and weapons. Typical Hellenistic uniforms are depicted, with helmets being either round in the Greco-Bactrian style, or the flat caucha of the Macedonians, coins of Apollodotus I. Military technology. Their weapons were spears, swords, longbow on the coins of Agathoclea and arrows. Around 130 BC, the Central Asian recurve bow of the steppes with its Goritos box started to appear for the first time on the coins of Zoilos I, suggesting strong interactions and apparently an alliance with nomadic peoples, either the Yuji or the Scythians. The recurve bow becomes a standard feature of Indo-Greek horsemen by 90 BC, as seen on some of the coins of Hermaeus. Generally, Indo-Greek kings are often represented riding horses, as early as the reign of Antimachus II around 160 BC. The equestrian tradition probably goes back to the Greco-Bactrians, who are said by Polybius to have faced a Seleucid invasion in 210 BC with 10,000 horsemen. Although war elephants are never represented on coins, a harness plate dated to the 3 to 2 ND century BC, today in the Hermitage Museum, depicts a helmeted Greek combatant on an Indian war elephant. The Milinda Panha, in the Questions of Nagasena to King Menander, provides a rare glimpse of the military methods of the period. The Milinda Panha also describes the structure of Menander's army. Now one day Milinda the king proceeded forth out of the city to pass in review the innumerable host of his mighty army in its fourfold array of elephants, cavalry, bowmen, and soldiers on foot. Size of Indo-Greek armies. The armed forces of the Indo-Greeks engaged in battles with other Indian kingdoms. The ruler of Kalinga, King Kharavela, states in the Hathagumpha inscription that during the 8th year of his reign he led a large army in the direction of a Yavana king, and that he forced their demoralized army to retreat to Mathura. Then in the 8th year, Kharavela with a large army having sacked Goradagiri causes pressure on Rajagriha. On account of the loud report of this act of valour, the Yavana Greek King Dimi retreated to Mathura having extricated his demoralized army. The name of the Yavana king is not clear, but it contains 3 letters, and the middle letter can be read as Ma or Mi. R. D. Banerjee and K. P. Jayaswal read the name of the Yavana king as Demita, and identify him with Demetrius I of Bactria. However, according to Ramaprasad Chanda, this identification results in chronological impossibilities. The Greek ambassador Megasthenes took special note of the military strength of Kalinga in his Indica in the middle of the 3rd century BC. The royal city of the Kalinga is called Parthalis. Over their king's 60,000 foot soldiers, 1,000 horsemen, 700 elephants keep watch and ward in precinct of war. An account by the Roman writer Justin gives another hint of the size of Indo-Greek armies, which, in the case of the conflict between the Greco-Bactrian Eucratides and the Indo-Greek Demetrius II, he numbers at 60,000, although they allegedly lost to 300 Greco-Bactrians. Eucratides led many wars with great courage, and, while weakened by them, was put under siege by Demetrius, king of the Indians. He made numerous sorties, and managed to vanquish 60,000 enemies with 300 soldiers, and thus liberated after 4 months, he put India under his rule. The Indo-Greek armies would be conquered by Indo-Scythians, a nomadic tribe from Central Asia. Legacy of the Indo-Greeks. From the 1st century AD, the Greek communities of Central Asia and the northwestern Indian subcontinent lived under the control of the Kushan branch of the Yuezhi, apart from a short-lived invasion of the Indo-Parthian kingdom. The Kushans founded the Kushan Empire, which was to prosper for several centuries. In the south, the Greeks were under the rule of the western Kshatrapas. The Kalash tribe of the Chitral Valley claimed to be descendants of the Indo-Greeks, although this is disputed. It is unclear how much longer the Greeks managed to maintain a distinct presence in the Indian subcontinent. The legacy of the Indo-Greeks was felt however for several centuries, from the usage of the Greek language and calendrical methods, to the influences on the numismatics of the Indian subcontinent, traceable down to the period of the Gupta Empire in the 4th century. The Greeks may also have maintained a presence in their cities until quite late. Isidorus of Charax in his 1st century AD, Parthian stations itinerary described an Alexandropolis, the metropolis of Arachosia, thought to be Alexandria Arachosia, which he said was still Greek even at such a late time. Beyond is Arachosia. And the Parthians call this White India. There are the city of Biyt and the city of Pharsana and the city of Korachode and the city of Demetrius, then Alexandropolis, the metropolis of Arachosia. It is Greek, and by it flows the river Arachidus. As far as this place the land is under the rule of the Parthians. The Indo-Greeks may also have had some influence on the religious plane as well, especially in relation to the developing Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism has been described as the form of Buddhism which, regardless of how Hinduist its later forms became, seems to have originated in the Greco-Buddhist communities of India, through a conflation of the Greek Democritean sophistic skeptical tradition with the rudimentary and unformalized empirical and skeptical elements already present in early Buddhism. Indo-Greek kings, their coins, territories and chronology. Today 36 Indo-Greek kings are known. Several of them are also recorded in Western and Indian historical sources, but the majority are known through numismatic evidence only. The exact chronology and sequencing of their rule is still a matter of scholarly inquiry, with adjustments regular being made with new analysis and coin finds. Overstrikes of one king over another's coins being the most critical element in establishing chronological sequences. There is an important evolution of coin shape, round to square, and material, from gold to silver to brass, across the territories and the periods, and from Greek type to Indian type over a period of nearly 3 centuries. Also, the quality of coinage illustration decreases down to the 1st century CE. Coinage evolution is an important point of Indo-Greek history, and actually one of the most important since most of these kings are only known by their coins, and their chronology is mainly established by the evolution of the coin types. The system used here is adapted from Osman Boparachi, supplemented by the views of R.C. Senior and occasionally other authorities. See also References. Footnotes. Works cited. External links. Indo-Greek history and coins. Ancient coinage of the Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek kingdoms. Text of Professor Nicholas Sims Williams, University of London, mentioning the arrival of the Kushans and the replacement of Greek language. Wargame reconstitution of Indo-Greek armies files dealing with Indo-Greeks and a genealogy of the Bactrian kings. The impact of Greco-Indian culture on Western civilization. Some new hypotheses on the Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek kingdoms by Antoine Simonin. Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek kingdoms in ancient texts.